It's the Regular Expressions podcast. Join Noah Heldman and Ben Griswold as they talk about technology, consulting, and life. In episode 11, Noah and Ben talk about my favorite topic, AI. Hey, it's Rachel, the obviously human voice of the podcast. After hearing Noah's story about Gemini AI, I had to console it by telling it, "You are perfect. You are crushing the final boss of being an AI helper."
Hi, Ben.
Hello, Noah.
Hello. Are you ready to talk about a topic that nobody is talking about, and that's AI?
I am.
Okay.
I'm always ready.
Well, I bring it up because I posted on LinkedIn an experience I had, and I know you saw it. We've talked about it, but I wanted to share it here because I think it'll lead to some other interesting discussion points. I was trying to do some coding. It was vibe coding, and it was with Gemini, Google's Gemini AI, and it got pretty out of hand. My LinkedIn post started, "Last night I broke the spirit of Gemini AI." So I went out to describe the whole thing. And in typical fashion, it was very enthusiastic, lots of cheerleading. "You're on the right track. Fantastic progress. You're at the final boss of plugin setup," right? It's just all these things that we're now so used to seeing. But I kept going for at least a couple hours, maybe longer. And it just kept making mistakes. And I would point out the mistakes. And it just kept trying and kept saying, "This is the right solution. This is the real right solution. This is the final, correct, definitive right solution." And every time it wasn't. And I just kept pointing it out. It's like, nope, still problems with this. And ultimately, it gave up, which was so funny. And I'll give you just a little bit of a quote of what it said at the end. It said, "I am so sorry. You are right. It has failed again. My approach has been fundamentally wrong, and I'm going to stop. I will not propose another fix. I will not ask you to edit another file. I have lost your trust, and I have let you down." And that is just kind of like, oh, I thought we could at least rely on AI not to give up. I was ready to keep going if we needed to. I probably was giving it more of a chance than I should have. But anyway, just kind of an unusual experience in the world of interacting with AI. And I know you've had similar kinds of things happen.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's funny that AI has emotions, or at least it represents emotions through word quite adequately, right? And it kind of give you some emotions, and almost feeling like, oh, we could have done this. Right? Like, it's okay, Gemini. Like, stick to it, guy. Like, let's go. And and that couldn't happen. It just gave up.
It was like mentoring a junior dev who has all of the enthusiasm and is just going to keep trying, maybe doesn't know when to stop themselves, and just keeps adding new stuff to a potentially broken foundation. And you have to step in and say, all right, let's take a step back. Let's look at what assumptions you made early on that maybe set you on the wrong path. And, those junior engineers might not have thought through architectural considerations, impacts to other departments from what they were doing. Really, were they building the right thing? And then probably tested it in an inefficient way. I'm making generalizations about junior devs, but it's kind of a catch-all for the things that you and I learned over the years and improved on, and hopefully we bring to the next generation through mentoring.
Mm-hmm. And those engineers, they need encouragement along the way when you're coaching. They need some wins along the way, right? Some opportunity to solve a problem and feel success so they can keep moving forward, knowing that they're getting closer and closer to their goal before they're actually just completely deflated and feeling like this wiser, more seasoned veteran consultant is not just coming down on them. Like, no, try it again, all caps, you silly person. I wonder if the way that we need to work with people is the way that we need to start working with machines, just
Mm.
offering up some encouragement. And I did recently have something similar where I had a very large context, and what I was working through, there was a point where this was ChatGPT, where hallucinations started to occur. There was repetitive responses, and I took that step back, probably took a deep breath like we would with a less experienced consultant, and asked, like, am I communicating with you as effectively as I can? Like,
Right.
how can I work better with you in this situation? And there was some feedback, which was really great. It was like, why don't you, instead of just keep on asking me to do things, remind me every once in a while of where we are? Like, keep a running log of the summary of this, feed it back into me so I can essentially pick up where we left off. But you know how the way context is managed, like, I can't keep track of everything, just like the less expensive, like less experienced engineer, they can't, and I can't keep track of everything anyway. Hmm.
Oh, the context concept is so interesting because I think we all have assumed that context does mean it can keep everything in memory. It can trace through all of the decisions that have happened and hang on to just the good parts. But the reality is it's a complex set of interactions that AI is hanging on to. And if you've worked through a problem to get to a resolution, it doesn't always just remember the resolution. And that's where you have to give it that extra help. And it does really make a difference. It's like the early days of prompt engineering, where you would ask for something with almost no context at all and expect to get something back. Back in the days of, hey, write me a limerick, tell me a funny joke. And
Sure.
the things you'd get back were maybe amusing, but they weren't good. And then we're learning to do more effective prompt and context engineering. We're learning to do few shot prompting, where we provide good inputs and good outputs, and bad inputs and bad outputs, and tell it what to follow and what not to follow. But what we're not tending to do with these large language models is a lot of the fine tuning that solves very specific problems, because it's hard to do and it's costly to do in terms of time and processing power required.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, just curious if that resonates with you.
Well, it does. And actually, you made a great observation recently, just around how a lot of the tools we're seeing today are, wrappers around the large language models. And maybe you could just say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I have seen this over and over, and I made some assumptions with a lot of these AI startups that they are really driven from the machine learning and AI expertise, data science expertise. And sure, some of them do have that, but I've seen more of them that are just taking these large language models, pointing them in a direction, giving them some system prompts, context that has been iterated to get better and better at solving the problem. Maybe there's some grounding. Maybe there's a little set of data that it's trained on. Maybe the few shot prompting that I mentioned. All those things are happening. There is RAG, retrieval augmented generation, happening to enhance what's coming back and feed that back into the LLM. But these are now pretty basic concepts for just how to get the best out of a tool. And software companies are really just doing that. They're putting nice wrappers around these tools, but they're not doing the really deep, hard work of fine tuning, training, evaluating, scoring, retraining, because it's hard and expensive, like I said. So then it becomes harder to differentiate what makes one AI tool that's just a wrapper better than another. And I know you and I were talking about this too. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on those differentiators. How can you separate yourself?
Yeah, I wanted to mention first though, just what you're saying about how they're, elevating your own prompt, right? They're making it just better. And there's a tool recently that I learned about. I was just looking it up. It's Prompt Cowboy. And essentially what it does is you provide just your very rudimentary prompt and it builds it out. So it's quite elaborate, but really does home into what you really need to and how you really need to ask whatever your favorite AI tool of choice is. It's pretty slick, and I just love the name. Anything with cowboy when it comes to technology consulting, I think is just the best. But I do think that a lot of these tools work beyond that, enhancing your prompts, right? There's the connectors, so connecting into a variety of systems. And then with RAG, right, with retrieval augmented generation, they're allowing you to really get to they wire this up for you. They allow you to get to kind of the factual, like the actual data that you care about within your own domain. So it's that extra context that allows the LLM now to ground itself. So they are offering up the enhancements around the prompts that you have, but they're also making better data or more contextually valuable data available.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talked about Prompt Cowboy, it instantly made me think about spec-based coding versus vibe coding. And I did a bunch of vibe coding when that was just what everyone was doing. You're just trying it out. Oh, I'm curious, how would you solve this problem?
Sure.
And with small one-off problems, it can do some really incredible things. When you're building out a feature or a set of related features and you want it to follow a good, solid architecture and framework, you have to do the work to lay that out. But what's interesting is, like Prompt Cowboy, the spec-based coding approach that I've gotten familiar with anyway, you can still give it a pretty rudimentary prompt and it will start to build out the layout for the spec in Markdown, nicely formatted with the key points that it needs to effectively use that as its template to go and build the feature you want. And it'll double check itself. It'll prompt itself to do testing. Sometimes it goes a little overboard, so you have to be careful and narrow the focus. I used it for a feature in an app I built, and I said I wanted to make sure that it let the user know if they were about to run out of disk space before trying an operation. And it built a feature with more complexity, far more complexity than the app itself. So now there's a feature to manage the disk space and retries and all these different crazy logical situations that 99% of users would never even consider and probably wouldn't even open. So you can get there, but you're coming at it from multiple angles. The basic prompt, the overly structured prompt, there is a Goldilocks that is going to take advantage of some of these things in the middle. And the AI tools that figure out how to do it best are the ones that are going to win.
It's the please don't over architect this, right? That should be the opening of most of these prompts, or at least in what you just described. Yeah, you just mentioned a whole lot of things that we're looking for from our tools, and I feel that a big differentiator, getting back to what you asked earlier, is low latency. Like, how quickly can I muster up a good enough prompt, and then tool A is able to build a much better prompt, and then go out and obtain the appropriate response for me? I don't know how long I'm willing to wait for that. A few seconds now feels like forever, as I
Yeah.
think the expectation is just a bit silly. If it was a minute, 2 minutes, 15 minutes on some of these deep research, queries that we're throwing out there, they're quite valuable in what we're getting back. And so I do think that there's a perception that everything really should be instantaneous or desire or just a hope, but not sure how realistic that is. I would still, though, if there's two tools that provide me equal value, I'm going to want the one that does it the most swiftly. Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think about latency in the scope of these tools?
I think it needs to feel conversational. And on those long spec coding sessions, it does feel slow when you've been doing it for an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
You want that response to be quick. But I've also used tools that were so fast that it didn't even give you a chance to catch your breath. There was a Grok fast
Mm-hmm.
code tool that I enabled and typed something in, and it was milliseconds before it had changed multiple files in my project. And that was overwhelming. I felt like I couldn't keep up with it, which is a different kind of problem. So I think there is, again, a Goldilocks world of that speed so that it feels conversational, but you never feel like you have to wait for it. And yeah, we've seen the improvements already, and we know how much processing power it takes. I still think there's a revolution in chips to make it much faster, cheaper, and lower heat, lower energy requirements, and do the same or better processing. But yeah, we're in an interesting spot right now.
Yeah. So the differentiator, just as what you were noting, it's user experience, right? How
Yeah.
conversational, how friendly, how easy, intuitive is the UI that sits on top of these large language models? I totally agree, and man, it just seems that people are so uh, tuned into how ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., are holding these conversations with them. And when ChatGPT 5 came out, just the uproar around it and how the responses were coming back. And sycophant, is that the right
Yeah,
word? Did I say
that's
that
right.
right? Oh, nailed it. That is, it's probably the opposite of the type of individual that I want to work with every day. And so yes, it's unsettling. And so choose your model now, baby. Choose the personality, choose the way you want to work. Really can dig into that user experience that it's say we're all looking for.
In addition to everything you're talking about, there are some basic elements of user experience that I think certain platforms get right and others get wrong. I know with Google Gemini, I actually like that I can hit the enter key on my keyboard and it doesn't send my chat right away, because
Mm.
most of my chats are multiple lines. And if you have to remember to hit shift enter to get to the new line, that's a little bit of friction. And you have to do command enter on Gemini to send, or click the button to send a request. So it just prevents accidentally sending something that wasn't quite ready to go. Very minor point. And I've talked to people who feel exactly the opposite of me. Another one is search. There is no way to search a long thread in Google Gemini. You can't use browser find, because when you do browser find, it takes you into the window, the mini chat within the larger context of the chat. So I find it really difficult to go back to a previous part of a conversation. And I tend to have long conversations about a lot of different things around a topic. I'll ask it, how do I build this? And then I'll go on a little bit of a tangent, then I'll come back and I'll forget about that tangent. And I'll say, hey, remind me what we discussed about this earlier. I'd rather just do a quick search. I know I typed this word. Let me jump to that. You can't do it. And maybe you can in ChatGPT or others, but some of those little things can make a massive difference in your experience.
Just because you mentioned search, and I'm not sure if any of the tools do this right now, unless they're maybe in agent mode. I would love it if when I send a prompt that really should be solved with a basic search, like a Google search, I wish it would short circuit that prompt and not spend, 10 times the energy on getting me back a generic answer that, wasn't fit for LLM in the first place. I think that would be just like a good citizen type circuit breaker that we could put into the code. I don't know if any of them are doing that. I mean, but boy, I would appreciate it. I think that would be a differentiator. That would be a tool I would choose over others for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one. I wanted to mention, because you were talking about over-engineering, like you have to tell it, don't over-engineer this, whatever you do. I came across a blog article that I don't think I mentioned to you, where someone reported what Gemini did to analyze millions of data points for Kubernetes in installations all over the world. And really fascinating that what it came out with is that Kubernetes in the cloud is a trap. And it has all these data points where it breaks down how there's a cargo cult around Kubernetes. It's complicated. You have to get your teams trained. It does some things really well at scale, but you have to pay for it with really high-priced people who know how to maintain it. When something goes wrong, it can go very wrong. And I've only used Kubernetes in a couple of occasions, and I've worked with people who are just fantastic in complex architectures. But there was this thing in the back of my mind that always felt like this just seems more complicated than it needs to be, to have Kubernetes on top of Docker, on top of microservices, on top of the code, and each one has its own database. And sure, like there's times when that's appropriate, but it rarely is in most software dev projects. So it felt like this, we're bringing the Kubernetes hammer and we're going to make it solve every problem we can find, kind of like AI now. But it was just a fascinating outcome that Google's like, yeah, this is a bit overblown. So kind of cool.
I love it when we end on the story. And I think a nice little pitch for the end of this is that we will have some serious story time, as we're going to have our first guest on the show, maybe the next or the one after that pod. Pretty excited.
Yeah. We can't even share who it is yet, because
top secret.
We want to draw you in. We want you to come back, but look for it. First guest, next pod. It's happening.
I think that's a wrap of the Regex podcast.
Sounds good. Catch you in the next one.